Hello, everybody. This is Mahadeva, the OG Thunder Wizard. Sorry, that was bugging me. It's still bugging me. All right. Right. So I'm giving an update on some Vedic astrological readings that I've done dating back 4 years ago. There's been a couple of them, and 4 years ago, in 2017, in fact, let me put the YouTube videos there for you. So in 2017, and again, maybe a year later, I can't remember which, I did some videos based on Donald Trump's Vedic astrology. So here's this one. This one was right after he was elected. I think it was right after he was elected. And so we'll call this Trump Astrology 1. And, the same now as then. This is interesting because I'm going to look at his chart based on things that are happening, and I'm going to make some predictions based on his astrology. Of course, this is my interpretation of his astrology. And you can't ever take out, somebody's, when it comes to things like astrology, you can't really take out somebody's personal feelings and agenda. So this is a way for us to see how accurate my astrological readings can be. All right, so there they are. So if you're watching this and you want to go see what I said before and see how it pans out, you can do that. So first time around, I remember I took a look at Trump's chart and I made some predictions. And it turned out that I was not accurate in the timing of my predictions. It seems, though, with everything that's going on, the general predictions were accurate. In fact, things that have been happening, gosh, in the last 24 to 48 hours have just blown my mind. And I'm like, oh, I guess I was right. This will be a question and answer. And I don't normally do this, but I'm going to go ahead and address the first question, which, the person didn't write the word question, as I always ask them to do, and did not put a question mark. But it's a rhetorical question, and I'm going to entertain it anyway. 2 Donnie Black 2 says, how can you act spiritual and be so blind at the same time? And I have to tell you, I'm deeply offended and hurt by that. And, I got to tell you, Donnie, the thing I want more than anything in this world is your approval. So I'm going to work for that. And if that means changing my opinions to meet your definition of spirituality, please tell me exactly what you'd like me to say and do, because then I can go to bed and know that you approve of me. But there's a good question in that, which is, do I know what the hell I'm talking about? No, when we're talking about astrology and stuff like that, listen, it's a great tool. I would never make any lifelong plans based on somebody's astrology. There's all kinds of fun stuff that you can do with it. But we're here to look at astrology, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And but he says, how can you act spiritual? I didn't realize that my spirituality was an act. I don't even know that I consider myself spiritual. I guess I am a spiritual teacher because I'm interested in those things, but I don't buy into the generalized assumption that spiritual means good or bad or anything else. It just means non-physical. So again, sorry, maybe you can teach me how to act, and I'll act the way you think a spiritual person should be. And then, am I blind? Well, we're all blind to some degree, and that's kind of what we're looking at. So we're going to look at Trump's chart here, and then we got another one, Diamond Day. Ugh, really? Politics again? I sub to this channel to learn about the spiritual, not the physical world. Well, part of being spiritual is that you have a physical body that experiences this physical world. And if you can't interface your spiritual self with your physical self in the physical world, then your spirituality is just going to be what's stuck in your head. And I've said, these are all good points. But as I've always said, my spirituality is about what works, what makes my life better. That's why I walked away from Christianity. That's why I walked away from the Bible and all that, because it was all a bunch of intellectual junk that did not jive with my physical reality. So Vedic astrology does jive with my physical reality, and according to 2 Donnie Black 2, I'm blind. I'm assuming because I don't see Donald Trump the way he does. So according to him, it seems that if you are a spiritual person, you think Donald Trump is great. And if you don't think Donald Trump is great, then you're not spiritual. That's what I'm gaining from that. So let's see if I'm right. So in 2017, I made some predictions, and let's take a look at Donald's chart here. This is Donald Trump, and this is his Vedic chart. So what you're looking at here, which you might not be familiar with, so let me explain it to you. What you're looking at here is you're looking at his birth chart, which is the one on the left. And then the one on to the right of that, which in the center you see the letter D and the number 9, D9. That's what's called his Navamsha. So I made some predictions based on these two charts. These are the two charts. By the way, I didn't put those two together. Whenever you do somebody's Vedic chart, these are the things that are going to come up. You're going to see the birth chart, and you're going to see the Navamsha. Now, before we go any further, this is Vedic astrology. This is the astrology of East India. This is not Western astrology. So people are going to, when I start talking about Trump being a Leo, they're going to get upset and say that he is a Gemini or something stupid like that. So you need to understand that both of those things are wrong because, number one, Vedic astrology does not use the sun sign as your sign. It uses your ascendant first and your moon sign second. So Donald Trump's ascendant in Vedic astrology is Leo. His sun sign is actually, as you can see there, the number 2, and you can see SU. That means that his sun sign is in Taurus. So Taurus is where his sun sits, but the sun, it's, you know, I'm still trying to figure out why Western astrology decided that sun was the most important thing. It's not. First, most important thing to your personality and your karma and how your karma unfolds in this life is your ascendant. And then second to that, or neck and neck to that, is the moon. And so the moon is your mind and your emotions, how you experience things, emotionally interact with things. Those are the two most important things, and sun is somewhere, you know, back in importance. The other thing you need to know, but the difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology, is that Vedic astrology is actually an accurate calculation of the stars. And that's called the sidereal zodiac. And that is actually the calculation of the starlight that's hitting you right now. You take a snapshot of the sky, that's sidereal astrology. What do they call it? The tropical zodiac, which is what Western astrologers use, is actually 2,000 years outdated, and it's an inaccurate view of the sun. So if you've got the ball of the earth here, you know, you got one that's looking straight and you got another one that's skewed. That's tropical. It's skewed and it's looking in the wrong direction, which means it ends up coming up with a wrong calculation. That calculation is continuing to go off by 1 degree every 72 years. So as it is now, Western astrology, the calculation of the stars that you're looking at for any given time period is off by 24 degrees, which is almost an entire sign. So that's why Trump's sun is in a completely different sign than what Westerners think. And that's why, lots of times planets will be in totally different houses. In other words, take your Western astrology and just dump it in the trash. I'm sorry that that's upset people. They've been, using Western astrology for years, and it's helped them, and I appreciate that. But, we're talking about a science here, and we're talking about exact mathematical calculations, and that's not up for debate. So that's why I'm a Vedic astrologer. So according to Vedic astrology, Trump is a Leo ascendant, and this is his chart. So now that we've gone through all of that, so here's the interesting thing. Now, in the first video, which I give you the link to, if you don't have to go watch it now, but I make some predictions, and my prediction is that based on Trump's chart, he is destined to be king of the world. You see that in his chart right there. So to Donnie Black 2, I'm sorry, I'm telling you what his chart says. According to the way I read it, it means that he was destined to become president. How do I know that? Because I look in now if you look in that diamond on the left where it says D1 and you see the number 2, that's Taurus, that's his 10th house. I won't get into explaining how that is. But you see UR, which is Uranus, and we don't deal with Uranus because that's Vedic astrology and blah, blah, blah. But RA and SU. So RA is Rahu and SU is Sun. Rahu is the north node of the moon. So the north node of the moon has to do with ambition. So whenever you see Rahu in the 10th house, right off the bat, you know that somebody has ambition towards their career because the 10th house is career. It's also your public persona. So whenever somebody has a strong 10th house, it means they're going to have a strong career, and it may indicate that they're going to be a celebrity. So right off the bat, just with Rahu there in the 10th house, Donald Trump is a celebrity. Are we still good to Donnie Black 2? I'm telling you good things. I haven't said anything negative. Am I blind? Are we in agreement that Donald Trump is a celebrity and that he's very successful in business? All right, am I blind still? All right, because this is what this is about. I mean, I don't care if I'm right or wrong about my predictions. I'm okay if I turn out to be wrong. I will lose no sleep about it. I'll go, maybe I was wrong or maybe the date was wrong, and I'm going to study. So I made some predictions last time around that Donald Trump was going to fail miserably in the early part of his presidency. In fact, I predicted that he might end up going to jail, that there was going to be a lot of taint to his reputation. And to my surprise, I was wrong about that. He was Teflon. I mean, nothing stuck. A lot of things were leveled at him, but that's true with pretty much every president. You know, Clinton survived two terms, and he went through some pretty intense opposition. Obama was constantly being harassed and all that stuff, and he lasted 2 terms. So, but I thought that he was going to go down. I thought he was going to go down early, and he didn't. And he lasted no matter what they threw at him. He survived. He was bulletproof. And so much so that he almost won this election second time around. Came very close to winning it. But he, as we know, he didn't. So I was saying that he was going to fail miserably in the first couple of years, and I'll tell you why. So if you look on the square in the left, the D1, in where it says number 2, you see Rahu and Sun, which, as I said, is 10th house, which is career, success, fame. Rahu wants to be successful. Rahu is, in fact, somebody's ambition. Rahu is everything having to do with materiality, which means good business, means fame, means riches. And the sun, now the sun is the planet of the king. And we see here that Donald Trump is a Leo. Leo is lorded over by the sun. So the sun, he's got a very strong ascendant, which makes for success. He's got Mars in there, which makes him a warrior. So you get Mars in the first house, it means, especially in Leo, it means that they're going to have a very powerful presence, and they're going to be able, like a warrior, just, be able to put their will towards what they want. And since his sign Leo, the sun is important, the sun is in the 10th house. So in his chart, so that's good. So that means the sun is working well for him, which again, Rahu and Sun in the 10th house with the Leo ascendant, that's fame. I mean, you couldn't get a better astrological forecast for somebody who was going to become emperor of the world. And Donald Trump came as close as somebody can in this life on this planet right now, and that is being the leader of the most powerful country in the world, which he still is, unless something's happened since I started this video. Now, opposite that, in the fourth house, which if you go and you see the number 8 there, in that diamond you see two words, you see KE and MO. So KE is Ketu, which is the south node of the moon. And then you have MO, which is moon. So that's his mind. Now what's important about that is if you look to the chart to the right, that other thing that has all those other, the exact thing, but instead of D1 it says D9. What you see is a complete flip. You see Rahu and Sun in the 4th house, and you see Ketu and Moon in the 10th house. This is very significant. I talk about that at length in that first video that I did. And in that video, I tell you that this is extremely important because the D9 chart tells you, number one, what's underneath the birth chart. So it's the foundation. So you could have really strong planets in the birth chart, but if in the D9 that things are contraindicated, it means that it will look good, but it won't have any strength to it. Now, if you have the opposite, you have things that look weak in the birth chart, but strong in the D9, it means that it will look shaky, but there will actually be a strong foundation. Now, when you have things like this, where you have a complete shift, where planets move, in this case, from the 10th house to the 4th and the 4th house to the 10th, it means you're having a complete flip. So on the one hand, it means that even though Trump on the surface is very, in his birth chart, he's very successful, and he's very wealthy, and he is a celebrity, underneath that, the foundation is not very strong. Now again, this is nothing personal to Donnie Black 2. I'm not judging him. I'm just telling you this is how astrology works. Now, if it were the other way, Ketu and Moon and Rahu and Sun were in the same houses, it would mean he was immovable, that his wealth and his status and his success would have been absolutely unshakable. But because they're flipped like this means that there's some instability. Now, the D9 chart, which you see on the right, is also the chart that tells you how you're going to be when you get older. Once you pass the age of 55, the D9 chart starts to get stronger, and your life starts to look more and more like your D9 chart. So when you have something like this, where Rahu and Sun is in the 10th and Ketu and Moon is in the 4th, and they switch places, it means that the significations of those placements are going to shift 180 degrees as Trump gets older. As he gets to be an old man, now his 10th house is going to be ruled over by Ketu and Moon. So it doesn't mean that his birth chart goes away. It just means that the influence of that becomes strong. So when you see this, it means there could be an actual complete flip of somebody's wealth and status and success. That's what I said in that first video. But my prediction is that as soon as he becomes, because there was all kinds of things. I mean, it's weird we've forgotten about it. I mean, there were so many things: the collusion with Russia, and the emoluments clause, and he was paying off, prostitutes and porn stars, and there was just a lot of things that were really coming at him. They impeached him, which, by the way, doesn't mean that they fired him. It means that they put him on trial. He was not found guilty, so he was impeached, but he was not taken out of office. At least in that first impeachment. Interestingly, there's only 13 days left, and they're talking about impeaching him again. We'll see what happens. So I thought for sure, because that's what was looming, I thought, this chart is saying that he's going to rise to prominence and then he's going to fall and crash, and I was making predictions that he was going to jail, and then I made another video saying, yeah, he's going to jail, he's not going to finish out his term. And looks like I was wrong. I mean, there's only 13 days left. Even if they get rid of him now, I mean, he still lasted a full term. But now I'm starting to think, I just, I didn't have my predictions right. Now, this is a general prediction. There are people out there who have been trying to predict things very specifically because of planetary this, that, and the other thing, and I'm not really good at that. I'm good at looking at general things. And before I came on tonight, I did some research, and I typed in Trump astrology, and I looked at 3 different astrological forecasts. 2 of them were Vedic charts that both of these Vedic astrologers assured people that Trump was going to win, and he was going to win decisively, etc., etc., and we all know that didn't happen. And both of these people were native Indians, and Trump is actually popular in India because of his anti-Muslim stance. I'm assuming that's what it is. There might be other reasons why he's popular. So they had an agenda. I think they liked the idea of him being president, and they may have had a personal agenda, and they were using some of these things. But let's explain why. My prediction is going to stay the same. I'm just, my timetable was off. And we'll see what happens, because anything can happen. What I've learned about Trump is that anything can happen. Rahu in the 10th house. Rahu is unpredictability, so you can't predict anything with this guy. So my prediction is that he will have a complete reversal of fortune and fame. And so the reason I came to that conclusion is because when you look at his birth chart, Rahu and Sun are in the 10th house, which means fame. It means fame, success, king of the universe, fame, success, and celebrity. You couldn't have a better scenario for celebrity than that. Rahu and Sun. Sun is the ego. So Sun loves being in the 10th house because the 10th house is the portico of the castle of the king when he steps out in front of his subjects. That's the 10th house. So the Sun is the king. So you have the Sun in the 10th house. That's the king addressing the peons. You put Rahu in there. Rahu makes him really obsessed with success and with fame and with fortune. And so that's him, but he's blown up. It just turns him into incredibly powerful, incredibly... in fact, there probably is nobody on the planet that is more famous right now than Donald Trump. So that shows up in his chart. And then the opposite of that in the 4th house, you see Ketu and Moon. Now, Ketu and Moon together is an interesting thing. Now, Moon and Sun are opposite each other. Rahu and Ketu are opposite each other. And as I'm looking at it here, Rahu and Ketu are the planets associated with this. Rahu represents when there's an eclipse over the sun. It's Rahu swallowing the sun. So the other thing that happens with Rahu and Sun is that Rahu is filled with delusions of grandeur. So there's the possibility that the person who has this, and again, you have to look at everything in the chart, but the person who has this could potentially become lost in their fame. That's not necessarily good or bad. Some of the greatest leaders have been really full of themselves, and it all depends on, what they do with that pride and with that ego. So let me see here. I have to make this larger so I can see all right, so as it turns out, yes, Rahu has the larger number of numbers, which means that, Sun is higher in the sky, and Rahu has the lowest number of degrees, which means that Rahu is sitting underneath the Sun, which means Rahu is influencing the Sun. Now, whenever Rahu in a conjunction, and they're conjunct, by the way, Rahu and Sun are conjunct. When you have Rahu and Sun in conjunct, it means the ego blows up. Positive or negative, that depends on all kinds of other things. But when Rahu has the lowest number of degrees, it means Rahu's in control of this conjunction, which means Rahu is in control of the Sun. That means his ego is being controlled by his ambition, his delusions, his desires. So this is the setup for potentially a con man. Again, it all depends on the chart. But that, if you want to find a con man, Rahu and Sun conjunct with Rahu with the least number of degrees. Am I still good, Donnie 2 Black? Am I still blind? Or, are we still good? Or did you leave? Did you leave and make sure, am I wrong and you ended up having to go watch something else? I hope that you didn't let the door hit your ass on the way out. Or are you still watching? All right. I'm giving him a hard time because he insinuated that I wasn't spiritual and I'm blind because I don't see things the way he does. All right, let's keep going here. So opposite that, this is going to have a huge impact on whether or not, if we're looking at Rahu and Sun conjunct with Rahu having the most impact on the ego, we now want to look and see where the moon is, because the moon is the mind, is the emotions, the mental well-being of the person. Now, moon is in the 4th house. The 4th house represents the mother, and it is in Scorpio. Now, right off the bat, even if we just have moon in Scorpio, it means that his mind will have been hurt. He will have been hurt and wounded by the Scorpio, which is the feminine aspect of Mars, and it's in the house of the mother. So right off the bat, he's got challenging issues with his mom. He's probably been stung by her and hurt by her, even without the moon there. But we put the moon in there. Now, I mean, I don't even, it doesn't mean he's going to end up, that in itself doesn't make somebody, a nutbag. It just means that they have some challenges. They need mom's love and mom stung them. Now you put Ketu in there. Ketu is the south side of the moon, the south node of the moon. And when you have Ketu and moon together, you have the possibility, when it's conjunct like this, for a very powerful shaman. But the other problem that can happen with Ketu and moon conjunct, Ketu destroys whatever he's around. So one of the worst things I've seen with people is when you put Ketu conjunct Venus. And in those cases, you have people who can't find love, or you end up with people who have like borderline personality disorder, or people who are sexually, they can't connect with people, they can't have relationships, they're incapable of loving. This is sometimes what happens when you have Ketu and moon conjunct, and Ketu has the lowest number of degrees. So when you have Ketu next to the moon, which is the mind is already a little bit unhappy because the mind is in Mars, which is the opposite of the moon, and it's the feminine, the water sign of Mars. It's Scorpio. So this means emotional challenges. Somebody's very deep emotionally. If Scorpio is in a good place and it's prominent, it means the person will have deep, intense emotions. They usually attach really intensely. So just by looking at this, he attached really hardcore to his mother, and his mother hurt him. And now we have Ketu and moon conjunct. Ketu has the lowest number of degrees, 27 degrees. Moon has 28, which means that Ketu is in control. Now, Ketu is the opposite of Rahu. Rahu is your obsessions, your aspirations, your wanting success, fame, and all that. Ketu says, I don't want anything. I don't want anything. And so Ketu wants to destroy the mind here, because Ketu is sitting underneath the moon, which is the mind and the emotions. Now, this could mean emotional instability. It could also mean the inability to focus, the inability to think things through. So at the best, you might end up with a shaman, somebody who channels the gods and channels, a psychic. It could be a psychic at best. At worst, you have somebody with major emotional issues and whose mind is not very good. Donald Trump, like me, I do this also, but Donald Trump, if you notice when he talks, he never really finishes his statements. He'll trail off and then go off on tangents, and sometimes he doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. Now, I'm not judging him for that. I do that too. But we see that here because Ketu and Moon are together. In fact, you'll see him talking sometimes, and he just, I don't know if this is something physical, but sometimes he'll be talking and then he'll just, you've seen him do that. Well, this is Ketu and the Moon. Ketu is trying to interrupt his mind. So Ketu says, I want to destroy whatever I'm around and take you out of the physical world, which means his mind is constantly leaving his body. Again, if he's a shaman, that's a good thing. If he's trying to be president, that's not necessarily the best thing in the world. Now, this is in his 4th house in his birth chart. Now, as I said, you look at the D9 chart next to it, Rahu and Sun have moved to the 4th house, and Ketu and Moon have moved to the 10th house. What does that mean? That means that underneath his Rahu and Sun is the D9, which means an unstable mind. And that is not good. It's the exact opposite of what Rahu and Sun are trying to do in his birth chart. So what that's going to mean, that's going to frustrate him, which means on the surface, he will achieve success. He will achieve fame, he will achieve success, he will achieve money, but underneath it, his mind, because it's unstable and it's underneath his Rahu and Sun, is going to take that away. How would that manifest? That would manifest as somebody who was very big in real estate but kept going bankrupt. That would manifest as somebody who ended up with a lot of lawsuits. That would somebody who on the surface looks very successful, but when you look underneath, he's in debt and has difficulties. Now that is exactly what the rumors are saying about him. So according to that, his charts here, his D1 and his D9, are reflecting exactly what we know about him. Now, when it turns to his reputation, again, his birth chart, which means that when he was born, he had a silver spoon in his mouth and success came to him easily. He became successful and became a celebrity. And then with that flipped, and Ketu and Moon now in his 10th house in the D9, it means that as he gets older, there's going to be a complete flip where he will go from being well respected and have a great reputation and be a king of the world, which is Rahu and Sun in the 10th house means king of the world. And when you put the exact opposite, which is Ketu and Moon, and replace it with that, you get where I'm going, the exact opposite. So it's going to be a crash, and it's going to be a crash the likes of which the world has never seen, as Donald Trump would put it. Now, that is just by looking at his chart. That's just looking at his chart. If I didn't know the guy, that's what I would know by looking at it. And I would say to the person, well, it looks like you have a lot of success coming your way, but as you get older, you're going to need to be a spiritual person. You're going to need to become a monk and make whatever money you can and then go off and meditate and be a monk because your D9 as you get past age 55 is going to want to take you in the opposite direction. So that means that if Donald Trump, according to this chart, assuming this is correct, if Donald Trump continues to try to be influential and famous and successful, he will be very frustrated. He'll have the exact opposite effect happen to him. So what I said in that first video, that my prediction was that he was going to fail miserably and that he was actually going to go from being famous and successful to being actually the opposite, infamous. He's going to be seen with derision, disrespect. And what's interesting is that is exactly what is happening to him right now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. But just to give you, as you know, what happened is that he lost the election. He continued to claim that he won, and he went out of his way to prove that he won and prove that he had been fraudulently dispossessed from, from winning, right? And as you know, there's been over 50 court cases. There has been the Justice Department by Bill Barr, his own appointed Attorney General of the United States, did an investigation and found there was nothing wrong with it. Their votes were counted just in Georgia 3 times, and his Republican appointee governor certified it. So in terms of objective reality, I'm sorry people, but we have to deal with objective reality here. In terms of objective reality, he did lose the election. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Sorry. But he has been continuing to promote that he won and that he has been, that he's been defrauded and all that other stuff. And there have been politicians that have been co-signing this for him, namely the 2 biggies in the Senate. I forget his name, Mitch McConnell, and who's the other guy? Lindsey Graham have been sort of saying things like, well, I don't know, there's some problems there. And now what did you see? You saw Lindsey Graham get really emotional and disavow Donald Trump. You heard Mitch McConnell not too long ago go and say, okay, we went through the process and the courts and everything have proven without a doubt that Biden won. And today, after his followers that he was talking to, and he at the very least he gave the impression that you should go and cause problems while they're voting. You go to the Capitol. I mean, he planned it all out. I mean, he didn't say you should storm the Capitol, but the hint was definitely there. Sorry. And that happened, of course, which ended up in the death of 5 people. And his followers were actually looking for Mike Pence. They were going to intimidate and or commit violence to Mike Pence, trying to force him to do something he wasn't capable of doing, which was overturn the election in Trump's favor. And of course, you know how that went. There were 5 deaths and arrests. And as a result of that, Trump's reputation literally overnight went spiraling down. So much so that today I went and I wanted to see what Fox and Friends had to say. I wanted to see what Fox News was going to have to say about Donald Trump, because Fox has been so supportive of Donald Trump, and Fox and Friends especially. He used to go on there and have those live telephone conversations, and he would spout whatever, and they would listen to him. And no matter what he did, he could do no wrong. And I heard them very vocally expressing, dissatisfaction, and they were bad-mouthing Trump. And worse than that, they were actually praising Biden, saying that Biden has been acting very presidentially, and I couldn't believe what I was watching. What I expected was that they were going to do what some of the other Fox people have done and try and somehow, either push it aside or, make it not as bad or something like that. But they were very vocal. They were disappointed with Donald Trump, and they were disappointed with the actions of those protesters, and they blamed him for it. And they said that Biden was very presidential. And I said, well, Fox and Friends has given up on Trump. That proves Trump has no more friends. So he's lost all of his support, all of his friends. We'll see what happens. Based on what has happened and based on his chart, I would not be surprised if he's removed from office before these 2 weeks run out. I'm not banking on anything. I don't have a personal agenda one way or another. But based on that, his chart, if that did happen, I would say, yeah, well, his chart kind of says he's going to have a drastic fall, and it's going to happen like that. And when it does, it's going to continue to spiral. Now, as you saw in the placeholder that I used here, I said prison or insane asylum. And I put that there because a while back I was listening to a Vedic astrologer. As I said, I've seen 2 already that said that Donald Trump was going to win the election, and of course we saw that didn't happen. And that was interesting to me after having done those first, because I'm seeing here that based on his chart, Trump, as he gets older, is going to get less and less successful, and he might end up bonkers. Because Ketu and Moon, Ketu underneath Moon means that Ketu is destroying the mind. So this could make somebody emotionally and or mentally unstable. And I personally, this is not a diagnosis, it's just my personal opinion, but my personal opinion is that Donald Trump suffers from borderline personality disorder comorbid with narcissistic personality disorder. He's actually what would be called a vulnerable narcissist. A vulnerable narcissist is somebody who is very emotionally hurt all the time. And it means that his base is that he's constantly feeling unloved. We look at his chart, Ketu and Moon in the 4th house in his birth chart. If based on his chart, I would say, oh, this guy has serious mommy issues. His mommy did not love him. His mom abandoned him. Because we have Ketu in the 4th house with Moon in Scorpio. That means that mom has literally abandoned him. And that's the worst kind of abuse a child can experience. It's even worse than outright physical abuse or verbal abuse. The worst kind of abuse is being neglected. It actually kills infants. If you don't hug a child, an infant, even if you feed them and clothe them and keep them warm, they'll die. And so when somebody's born with this and they go through this, as they become adults, you end up with borderline personality disorder, narcissists, cluster B personalities. People have major serious emotional and psychological issues, but they're emotionally based. Ketu and Moon conjunct with Ketu having the lowest number of degrees can indicate somebody who has mental and emotional issues. Again, I'm just looking at the chart. Now, as it happens, if you do some research on Trump, you find out he's got both mommy issues and daddy issues. That makes sense because Rahu is conjunct Sun in the 10th, which would be dad. So that means he felt disconnected, he felt neglected by mom, and he felt judged by dad. That's just what the chart tells me. As it happens, if you do research on him based on the information available, that's the rumors that are being touted about him by his own niece. So what I'm predicting is going to happen, there is a real possibility he could end up in prison, but there's also a possibility that he might end up in an insane asylum. Or at the very least, he will be talked about as though he's emotionally this and that. And people are talking about him that way. Watch what happens. Because of what happened, because of the storming of the Capitol, let me just set the stage for you. It would have been different, would have been bad for him, but it would have been different had he been in the White House minding his own business, or if he'd been on the golf course and a bunch of extremist nutcases had decided unilaterally on their own that they were going to go and storm the Capitol in his name. That would have looked bad for him, but we would have not blamed him. What ended up happening, as you know, you were there, he stood there and he told them, while the Senate and the House were verifying Biden's electoral victory, he was telling them that he had been robbed, that they had stolen the election from him. And he said, I hope Mike Pence does the right thing, and they should, and he's talking about the good senators versus the bad ones, and we need to encourage the weak ones, as he put it, to vote in my favor. He kept on telling his followers, the majority of whom we found out are people who are fringe elements. They're people who are into QAnon. They're into, anybody watching me here who's into that stuff? Huh? Who's my friend here who started off? Donnie Black 2? You into QAnon? People who were white supremacists, people who were militias, guys who are far right-wing revolutionary types anyway. He was telling them to go down the street and to encourage the weak senators to do the right thing And he also insinuated that Mike Pence needed a good talking to. And you saw what happened. They stormed it with violence, and they stole things. They vandalized it. I mean, they did things like urinate into the offices of people, stealing things, smashing things. It wasn't a peaceful protest by any stretch of the imagination. Now, Donald Trump, because of what happened, whether you believe he's responsible for that or not, just this association of the very people he was talking to minutes later storming that is a stain on his reputation that will never go away. In fact, in the future, when people talk about Donald Trump, the first thing, assuming something even more scandalous doesn't happen, after today, the first thing that they will say is, oh, that guy who tried to overthrow his own government. Trust me, that's what's going to happen. That stain on his reputation is never going away. That's not my opinion. That's just a fact. I mean, I watched last night. If you watched it, what was going on, you saw what happened too. You saw all of most of his most famous political supporters were emotionally and vehemently distancing themselves, and now there's talk amongst a lot of them about getting rid of him, getting him out of office. So that is reflected here. Ketu and Moon, when it's completely flipped. Now, Ketu and Moon by itself in the 10th doesn't necessarily mean that, but when Ketu and Moon in the 10th house in the D9 is exactly opposite of the D1, where Ketu and Moon was in the 4th, it moves to the 10th. Rahu and Sun is in the 10th and moves to the 4th. It means complete shift, 100% flip. And so that was my prediction in those first two videos, that listen, it's just a matter of time. We're going to see a complete destruction of his reputation. He might end up in prison. He might be seen, as a con man, a fraud, and I had other reasons for saying that. And I was certain in those first two videos that it was going to happen then. It looks pretty strong like it's happening right now. Anything can happen. I seriously doubt he can survive this. And by the way, in case you don't know, there are all kinds of lawsuits that are waiting. There are lawsuits that are being investigated and put together now, but because he's a sitting president, you can't bring any legal action, or you can't prosecute a sitting president. That's custom and law. The moment he stops being president, he will now be eligible, even if he's able to pardon himself, which there's doubt he'll be able to do that. But that only gives him immunity from federal crimes, not from state crimes. And there's no doubt in my mind that there's going to be a huge push to hold Donald Trump responsible for insurrection and treason. And there might even be some kind of legal things that are going to be brought against him for that. Here's my prediction. My prediction is all the stuff you've forgotten about, like the Russia collusion, the obstruction of justice. Those are two separate things connected. And the emoluments clause. Do you know what those are? Now, you've forgotten about all of those. If you're a Fox News watcher, you probably didn't even know those were going on. You've heard that he's been accused of that, but the Russia thing hasn't gone away. It's just they can't prosecute it. And now, and it's a conflict of interest for the federal government to try and prosecute a sitting president. You got this conflict of interest because they're there to serve the president. The moment he stops being president, who was ever running that thing, and all of that evidence is still there. The evidence hasn't gone anywhere. Maybe they have proof for all we know, but the evidence and/or proof hasn't gone anywhere. So that's going to raise its head. He's also going to be. He's got all kinds of tax fraud issues that are waiting for him, and I predict he's going to be sued by Dominion. So if you haven't been watching what's been happening, let me explain it to you. So as you know, part of the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump and his lawyers have been fomenting is the idea that the ballot counting machines, which are owned by a company called Dominion, that there was this conspiracy with them and China and a defunct, dead South American dictator, and et cetera, and that there was this conspiracy, and that the machines and the software and everybody in the world apparently was working to skew the vote so that Donald Trump wouldn't win. So those people, Dominion, started threatening to sue the lawyers and the media, the news media that was touting this. So Fox News and some of the other right-wing, the news media outlets that have come up that have been continuing these stories that Dominion has been part of this conspiracy to defraud the vote. So Dominion said, if you keep doing this, we're going to take you to court. We're going to sue you because they can prove. Apparently, the assumption is they can prove that those things are false, and you being a news channel, knowingly giving out false information, you're damaging my business. Now you're damaging my reputation and my business, and so I'm going to sue you. And as soon as they threatened to sue, I mean, I saw it. Maybe you didn't see it. Fox News and those other outlets went online and completely reversed themselves, and they said there is no evidence that Dominion has done any of these things. There is no evidence that this and this, and they refuted every single one of those points, and they haven't repeated them since because they'll get sued for it. I believe Donald Trump is going to be held accountable, and he might get sued by those same people because he was part of that and instigated that. So, I mean, there are so many things waiting for him. And that was the case before this whole stuff happened. That was going to be the case even if he lasted two whole, sessions as president, whatever that is. But now that it's almost assured that he will not, I mean, what could possibly happen? Unless you overthrow the government, what could possibly happen to get him back in there? So this is in the chart here. The chart here is saying that he is going to have a huge, major fall in terms of his reputation, in terms of his career, in terms of his finances. And there is some evidence here that we'll see an increase in his mental and emotional instability. That's just looking at his chart here. So, having said that, that's my update, and you can watch the other two and see how right or wrong I was. Again, I'm making predictions, and I'm totally okay if I end up being wrong about it. This is fun for me. I won't lose an ounce of sleep. I'm not trying to give any psychic predictions. This is fun, but I am making a prediction, and I'm telling you exactly how I'm making that prediction in case you're a Vedic astrologer, and the fun part will be to see how accurate this turns out to be. So far, it looks like I've been right. We've yet to see. It didn't happen as quickly as I thought it was going to happen. But it looks like it still might happen. So, having said that, I'm happy to take some questions about anything. The best way to interact with me is to ask an honest question and or share an honest feeling. As you can see, I don't respond well to passive aggressiveness or people that don't ask honest questions. If you're a pain in the ass, I'll just block you. I already gave Diamond Dane an earful. If you don't want to watch this video, don't watch it. The presumption, I got to say this, don't take it personally because you're not the only person that does it, but the presumption, this is my channel. I get to come on here. I make the videos. I can make whatever video I want about whatever I want, and I'm going to have my own opinions and my thoughts. And the presumption of people that they can throw out some kind of guilt because I'm not talking about what they want to talk about, or I'm not saying the things the way, it's so presumptuous. Turn the channel off, watch something else. It's just, the entitlement behind that mindset, to that you get to just turn on your computer for free and somebody will spend 2 hours talking about whatever, and you have the you know what I mean? That you get that somehow I'm going to go, oh, you don't want me to talk about that? Oh, what should I talk about? Just, the presumption and the entitlement of it. It's amazing. If I don't like what I watch something else. I got better things to do than try and control what people do. All right, Rohan Kapoor, question. Do you consider Uranus, Neptune, Pluto in Vedic astrology? I don't, and that's only because the Vedic astrologers that I've learned from don't. And the reason for that is because those 3 planets are generational. So they're very slow moving. So we're talking about, with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they stay in the same spot for I don't know how many decades or whatever. So it doesn't, it's like some person born a year later, a different date, it's having the same thing. So the idea is that it's not having such a direct effect on somebody to such a degree. But the other reason is that Vedic astrology is based on the original astrology science. In case you guys don't know this, the reason why Western astrology and Vedic astrology are so similar, in fact, they're pretty much identical. The only difference is, as I said, a slight difference, 24-degree difference in calculation. Other than that, we're talking about the same 12 houses, same 12 signs, all that other stuff. And that's because 2,000 years ago, there was a society that was neither in India or in Europe. It was in the Middle East, in what is now Afghanistan. And that was a society, was a city-state, and their entire religion was based on astronomy. And so they worshiped the planets, and they created what we now know of as astrology. And what happened is 2,000 years ago, wise men from India and wise men from Greece both traveled and met at that place, and they both studied it, and then they went back to their respective homelands, and that's why you have these slight differences. Basically the same, but these slight differences. And Vedic astrology they actually had an astrology which used the moon, the lunar mansions of the constellations, which are called nakshatras. So they already had that, and then they took this new thing and they put it on top, which is why, if you've noticed, nakshatras are in multiple signs at the same time, because it's not exactly laid over. But that's why also Vedic astrology is very precise. And that's one of the reasons why I use it. So I hope I answered your question. Let's see. Shelley Meyer doesn't agree with me. And so again, tell me what you think so that I can think the way you want me to. Will you like me then? Philip Church, you're doing a good job. The force is strong with you. Thank you, Jedi Master. Rohan Kapoor, question. What's the difference between Lagna and Navamsha chart? I think I talked about that. So there's all kinds of differences. I mean, I don't even know all the differences. It's so huge. But in this case, Lagna is your birth chart, which has to do with your, what happens to you when you're born. It's still your karma. You never stop being your birth chart. But the Navamsha is as I said, it is the foundation of your chart. So what if the Navamsha and the birth chart are in agreement, it'll be strong. If the Navamsha and the birth chart are at odds, there will either be differences, superficially or otherwise. And the Navamsha also represents your spouse and your marriage, but it also represents the influence that becomes stronger over time. So the Navamsha can represent your life after the age of 55. So the older you get, the more of your Navamsha comes through. And that's what we're doing here. We're looking at the Lagna and Navamsha to see how Donald Trump's life is going to change. Now, as I said, if his Rahu and his Ketu and his yeah, if his sun and Rahu and his Ketu and moon didn't switch but stayed in the same place, then he would be, he'd be king for life. He would be the one guy that they would decide, America is now a dictatorship and we're going to make him a dictator. But because it flipped like that, it's going to be the opposite, which means that he's going to crash and burn, and it's going to be a nasty fall. And again, I'm totally okay if I'm wrong about that. I'll be the first to admit it. What else? Dakota Spruill, question: what do you think of Fred Trump? I don't know anything about him other than he's Donald Trump's dad. That's all I know. And what I've heard is that he was, he wasn't the most loving dad, and that Trump has daddy issues. That's what I've heard. Other than that, I don't know anything. I don't know anything more than you do. And then you say Trump's brother, who was driven to alcoholism bordering suicide by his father and brother, and father's narcissism and sociopathy. Yeah, I've heard that too, and that's very sad for everybody. All right, what else? Andrew C. tried to be cute, and YouTube didn't let him get away with it, so I like seeing that. Dakota Spruill, am I pronouncing that right? Spruill, it looks like a German word. Question: how inaccurate is Western astrology? It depends. If we're talking about general things, because if we're talking about a planet in a house, there's, 30-something degrees in the house. So Western and Vedic are off by 24, which means you can look at a Western chart and a Vedic chart, and let's say sun is in the first house in both, but in one chart it'll be low on the horizon, and another one it'll be high in the horizon. And then if you're looking at nakshatras, then you're going to see some pretty major differences there. So there can be general things that are true. So my experience is there are people out, one of the things that bugs me is people who can't own their opinions. Like so far, 2 people don't want me to own my opinion because they don't agree with it, and they want me to have a different opinion, and they're going to try and guilt me out of it instead of just watching another video. I have a really hard time with people that don't own their opinions. Even if I disagree with you vehemently, I will have far more respect for somebody who can own their opinion. And there are people, like when it comes to, like, one of the things that drives me crazy in this polarized day and age of politics, like if I'm looking on a dating site and I see somebody who says politics, middle of the road, I go, bullshit. You don't want to piss anybody off, so you just won't make a commitment. And I see that in people's homes where the husband will say, let's say, be really hardcore Republican, but the wife, internally isn't. She's more of a Democrat, but she has daddy issues, and so she doesn't want to piss off her husband. So she just says, "Oh, you know what? I don't think about any of it. It's all Greek to me, and I'm just a middle of the road," meaning I don't want to piss anybody off. And I don't like that. That bothers me. Own your opinion. Be proud of what you believe, because at least if you if you make a stand, you can be wrong later. But if you're just middle of the road, then nothing matters. Today I went, it was raining, and there wasn't a whole lot to do, so I went and looked at surfboards, and it was a boutique store. They had some cool surfboards, but it was really like this boutique store that had like clothing, and there was a woman behind the thing, and she was, it bothered me because I could tell she was totally trying to figure me out. She heard my accent. And, I'd said 2 or 3 words, and she knew exactly what my accent was. And she said, "Oh, you're here on vacation," which bothered me. It's like, get out of my business. But I said, "Yeah, I've been here for 1.5 years." And she asked, "How are you doing? How are you liking it?" I said, "I'm having a great time." I said, my country's democracy is in serious jeopardy. So I'm had a pretty eventful evening. And she said, "Yeah." And then she says, "It's hard to know who to believe." I said, "No, it's not." She said, "It's so hard to figure out the truth." And I said, "No, it's not." She said, "It's hard to figure out what the facts are." And I said, "No, the facts are the facts. That's not hard to figure that out." And I said, "The problem is we've got 2 sets of," and she said, "in the news anyway." Well, I said, "Well, that's not hard to figure out either. You just have 2 different realities being given." And she said, "Yeah, that's right." And she says, "And neither of them matter." And I stopped at that point. Internally, I started getting angry with her because I started saying, it absolutely fucking matters. The truth is important. Facts are important. I didn't say that because... But what annoyed me was it was obvious that she was so codependent. I could tell she was framing the argument so that no matter which side I was on, because I said at one point, I started talking about it and I said, what's interesting is that you can't even tell which side I'm on by what I'm saying. She says, I know, and it doesn't matter. But I could tell she was not going to take a position because either she didn't want to piss off the customer and or she was so codependent. She didn't, she couldn't tolerate the thought of having any kind of conflict with somebody. I don't respect that. Now, if somebody's going to have a difference of opinion with me, I want them to do it respectfully, without guilt and manipulation, and all that. But, but don't kiss my ass and pretend you don't have an opinion. Or worse yet, are you choosing to be ignorant? That is part of the problem here. We have people who are willfully ignorant. Some people are willfully ignorant because they don't want to accept whatever is being given to them that they don't like. And there are people who are willfully ignorant simply because they just don't want to cause problems and they don't want to be disliked. I have such a problem with that. Because it is that kind of thing that got us exactly where we are. I have to say, what's his name? The Republican from Utah, Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney last night said that a lot of the things that I'm saying, and he's got a lot of different political bent than I do, but I really respected what he had to say. He said, if people, because what people were saying, if you were watching, there was still debate about whether or not they were going to certify Biden's election. And the arguments that were being given were, people are frustrated. People don't know what to believe, which is not the point. What people think and what is really going on are two different things. And I got really upset with people like Lindsey Graham and others who would say things like, well, in my opinion, I think it was him, it could have been somebody else, but in my opinion, I think the election was off. And it's like, those people know what the truth is and what isn't. They are simply just parroting what their constituents say, who are uneducated and emotionally unevolved and don't know the difference between truth and rumor. And so they say, I don't know what's going on and I'm frustrated and I want to find out the truth. And instead of, in your position as a politician who knows what's going on, instead of educating them as to here's the truth and here's how we know it, you're so afraid of losing your political power that you start parroting them. And then you go in a session of Congress and you say, my constituents are frustrated because they don't know the truth, because they're ignorant of the fucking truth and they don't know how to figure it out. And Mitt Romney said, when people don't know the truth, you educate them on it. That's your job as a leader. That's why you've been elected to lead, so you can help them know what the truth is. So this whole idea of not wanting to take a side, I don't know what got me thinking about that, but it's nothing anybody said or didn't say. But, choosing not to take a side and choosing not to want to know is why we're where we are. And if more people, said, well, actually, we can figure out what the truth is and here's how it's done. Now, you don't have to like it. I don't like it, but that's what it is. If more people did that, we wouldn't be where we are. But it's because, I was going to make a video on it and I'm still thinking about uploading it. But, those of you who are in that spot and you're frustrated and you don't know who to believe, you have no idea how badly you're being manipulated. You're being manipulated by rich people. And I can tell you exactly who they are. You want to know who they are? Go look them up. You want to know who the hidden cabal is? You want to know who the elites are? Who are brainwashing you and trying to take away things like, actual facts versus rumor. You want to know who they are? I'm going to tell you exactly who they are. You can go look them up. Do research on them. They're called the Koch brothers. Everything that happened yesterday, the storming of the Capitol by United States citizens who were misinformed of the truth, that happened because 35, 40 years ago, the Koch brothers, and this is, you can document it, planned out how to sow confusion among the population and how to change. I've been alive long enough. If you haven't been alive as long as me and or you're not educated, then you won't know this. But I have watched what happened. Politics were different 40 years ago. I mean, there were still all kinds of issues and problems, but politics were very different. Politics was about it was about economics and world political strategies versus different kinds of economics. In other words, people on the one side, somebody said, well, we should have limited government and less taxes so that people can work for themselves, and we shouldn't take away companies' ability to control how much money they make and what they do. And on the other side, you had people saying, no, you've got a lot of people who are poor and who are workers, and we need to safeguard their income and we need to safeguard their health. And that's what it was about. It wasn't beyond that. You didn't talk about somebody's religion. You kept religion out of it. And 40 years ago, the Koch brothers came in and started to change. They went because they said the way for us to make a lot of money is to influence policy in government. And the way to get our people in government who will pass the laws that we want, which will keep us from having government oversight. So whenever you hear Republicans talk about limited government and not being told what to do, they're making you think it's about your personal freedom that they're protecting, but it's not. They're protecting the freedom of the Koch brothers and big, huge industry. They're protecting their freedom to make as much money as possible without having to make sure that their manufacturing plants, because these guys are manufacturers, they manufacture chemicals, paper products, plastic, and they're in the petroleum industry. So they're all about making as much money as possible without having to make sure that air is clean, water is clean, and the environment is healthy, and that people make good livings. Because if the government is like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, was created so that big giant corporations and big giant factories couldn't throw out garbage into the rivers and into the air. But that costs money. It costs money to make sure that you don't have any pollutants going out into the air, and it costs money to make sure that you don't have garbage going into the streams. And so these guys didn't want the government limiting their ability to make a lot of money and spew garbage out wherever the hell it was and protect people's health. So they started changing the dynamic, and they changed it from being about international politics and finance to religion. So instead of it being about fiscal conservatism and taxes, it now became about family values, and that was introduced with Ronald Reagan. I was a Republican at the time. I was just old enough to vote, and Ronald Reagan came in, and I had this gut feeling that there was something wrong about him. I didn't trust him. I remember telling my dad, and even my dad, whatever. My dad was also a Republican, and we both said, I don't trust this guy. And he was the guy that started with the whole family values, and Republicanism was about family values. And so you had Republicanism moving away from fiscal conservatism and strength through peace and a strong military and us controlling things in the world, right? Being the leader of the world, which is what really Republican values were really about. It changed from that to family values. No sex before marriage, no abortion, no same-sex marriage. People should be religious. So God and Jesus started getting intertwined. Before that, you had Christians on both sides of the aisle. You had Democrats who were born again Christians, and you had Republicans who were born again Christians. They just had different economic values. But now it became, if you were a good American and you liked Mom and apple pie and Superman and Jesus, then you also were a Christian and you believed in this and that, and and that was the mask. It wore the mask of religious and cultural conservatism, and underneath that was, when they said freedom, you thought they meant freedom to worship however you want, and what they really meant was, no, freedom for those guys to do whatever they want with their factories. When they said to you, lower taxes, you said, great, I don't have to pay taxes, and they say, we're the party that's against taxes. Now, you thought they meant that they were going to lower your taxes, but what they meant was they were going to lower those guys' taxes. The Koch brothers do you know how much money I pay in taxes? I'm self-employed. I create my own business. I pay something like, it's crazy how much the percentage of the money I make goes to taxes. You know how much the Koch brothers pay? You know who did that? People pretending to be politicians. If you go back in time, starting in the 80s, what happened is they would give tons of money for people to go and become local and all the way up to the highest level of government politicians. And if you took their money, they gave you a book. You can find them out there. Books, binders that tell you what to say, what to believe, what bills to support, the rhetoric that you're supposed to use. They teach you how to be a successful politician. And as long as you keep under the radar pretending to be this moral guiding light to the world while protecting their bottom line, they continue to keep giving you money, and it's a good gig. And you can make a lot of money being a shill for these people. You're told that global warming is a lie. They don't tell you who's lying or who's making money from it. But the Koch brothers make trillions of dollars from petroleum. You stop using petroleum because you think it's destroying the environment. Guess who loses money? The Koch brothers. So what do? They put that in some liberal agenda, that believing in global warming is the same as believing that two men should kiss and get married. They've made it the same thing. You're not a real American if you believe in global warming. You've got a liberal agenda. And you're being manipulated. You're being manipulated and emotionally stimulated to believe whatever the fuck they want you to believe so that they can make money. And what's ironic is the people who stormed the Capitol yesterday did so under the belief that those people were lying to them, that they were being lied to by the liberals. And they were going to go put the liberals in place because they were trying to steal the election. And the ironic thing is that what they're afraid of is actually happening. It's just completely flipped on its head. The very people that they think are there to protect them are the ones that are lying to them and manipulating them. And so if you claim to be somebody who researches this stuff, I strongly recommend that you do some actual research into the Koch brothers going all the way back into the 80s. And I wish I could remember, there is a documentary about them, and you should go watch that. I can't remember the name of it. Go look for it. It used to be on Netflix. Anyway, enough of that. I'll get back to actual questions about astrology if you want. Okay, Tanya Whitehead. Please don't do that. Please do not talk about another channel. I haven't watched it, so I don't want to. I do not want to co-sign that because I don't know anything about him, and I don't want you sending people to other channels because I don't know if the information is accurate or not. So I'm going to take that off. Yeah. Anyway, nothing personal. I don't do that. Cosmic Wanderer, worldly politics are only a distraction to keep people away from more important things. I don't agree with you, Cosmic Wanderer. Worldly politics are the external manifestation of people's unconscious mind, which has everything to do with their spirituality. You know, as you know, I'm a spiritual person, but I have a physical body. I have to live in a physical home. I have to eat physical food. So what physically happens is important. And to, you know, again, that puts it on the line of somebody who's just, you know, being, willfully ignorant and doing that because either they don't really understand it and or they don't want to be in conflict. That's what I get from that. So I don't agree with you. I think that if you're a spiritual person, you have to, at the very least, need to know what's going on. Now, I'm not a political person, but that doesn't mean I'm not aware. Because, look, we almost lost. Look what do you guys realize what almost happened? I've been telling people privately that this was going to happen. I haven't talked about it a lot on the channel, but I've been telling people, no, watch what happens. They go, oh, Biden won. I'm like, no, that doesn't mean anything. Trump isn't going to leave. He might even take over the government. If he can, he'll take over the government. Watch what happens. He's not done. Until he's gone, anything can happen. I was shocked about what happened yesterday, but I wasn't surprised in the slightest. So I'm not completely in agreement with you. Maybe I'm not completely understanding where you're going with that, but we need to be smart about what's going on. Okay, let's see here. What else? Any other questions? Dakota, question: how inaccurate is Western astrology? And a lot of my chat feels your chart feels very accurate, but I believe when you say the Western chart is off by a bit. It's off. It depends on the chart, but it could be completely off. If we're talking about a planet in a completely different house in a completely different sign, then the signification is going to be totally different. It's already different if we start getting really, precise about the nakshatra. So, the point is that, look, you've got Vedic astrology out there. Just go get a Vedic reading and just, there's a Vedic astrologer on YouTube, which I can tell just by listening to her that she was a Western astrologer for years. I forget her name. Tony something. I forget her name. Anyway, a Southern belle with blonde hair, and I can just tell by her vibe she was a Western astrologer for decades. But she said, I became a Vedic astrologer simply because Western astrology is inaccurate. It's inaccurate enough. It's not a slight inaccuracy. It's a pretty big inaccuracy. So I would just drop your Western chart altogether and get an accurate Vedic astrological chart. Save yourself some confusion. Robert Connolly, Socrates, Galileo also were crazy. And, you can tell the intelligence of somebody who has to put their name in all caps. And then you can tell their intelligence by the fact that they speak in full sentences and they write with subjects and verbs and they use punctuation. So Robert Connolly, did you follow that? I don't know what that means. If you have a thought, at least write it out, a full sentence. We can handle it. We can read your full sentence and get a better understanding of what it is you're trying to say. Cosmic Wanderer, we're okay. I already just. Diamond Dane lulls. You're looking at Fox as a basis for Trump support. Who are you talking to, Diamond? Are you talking to me? Who are you talking to? No offense, but you're way off. You need to look at independent media. That's Trump's support. There is no independent media. I agree with you that Fox News is not independent, but based on that, I think you're talking about some of the new right-wing media. That's Trump support. And again, I don't even know what your point of that is. So, I don't appreciate the passive-aggressive, you're going to laugh at me, you're kind of way off. If it puts something to it. You're going to make a statement, put something to it. Name the sources that you think are supporting. Give us an idea. What are you talking about? Are you pro-Trump? Are you anti-Trump? Go ahead and own your position. From that, I can't tell. I'm annoyed by what you just wrote because I can tell there's something underneath it. I don't appreciate what feels like passive-aggressive. What is it? What are you doing here? Cosmic Wanderer, this is like Freud's psychoanalysis. Yeah. Freud was way ahead of his time. In the end, it don't really matter. All presidents are puppets. Yeah, again, that's just so easy. It's so easy to say that. That is such that is, you know, you're just giving up. That's you know, you're just looking for an excuse not to have an opinion, not to be educated. It's so easy to say that. All presidents are puppets. All politicians, you know, it's too easy. Democracy is a farce. So I'm already gaining two things. You don't really understand what's going on. It's too much for you. You don't like it. You've got a victim mentality. So victims tend to generalize everything. The media, all presidents. It's a cop-out. That's the word I was looking for. Diamond Dane, you're copping out on your own life. And it's nothing to brag about. It just means that for whatever reason, you don't like being in conflict, you don't understand it, or it frightens you, or you don't want to put the effort in to learn. Again, I'm okay if somebody says, you know what, I'm just not really very political and I'm not interested in it. I can accept that. But when you're going to try and give an opinion like this and you're going to make some determination like all presidents are puppets and democracy is a farce and all that other, you know, I can tell that you're not interested in putting the time and effort to really know what's going on so that you can have an opinion. So I don't respect that at all, and I don't agree with you at all. Jack Orino says it was Antifa. No, we know exactly who it is. They've got the pictures. And not only that, we have them on camera saying their name and who they are. It wasn't Antifa. You're being manipulated. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Based on that, what that tells me, you're not educated. Two, it tells me that you already have an emotional agenda of being a victim. So you're easily manipulated by the very people I told you about, the very people who say that they're fighting for your freedom and they're going to give you gun rights and take your taxes away and all that. But in reality, they're giving all that to the elites whom we know of, the Koch brothers being one of them. And you like that idea, so you're easily manipulated. If I come to you and I say, they're taking your freedom away from you, those people in government, those people in the university, those people in NASA, right? And you're going to, and then instead of owning your side, we're going to take the obvious other side, which is Antifa. And instead of, you know, because if you were to say, yeah, these were Trump supporters, I'm a Trump supporter, and they violated the seat of democracy, and I don't want to be associated with that. So the easiest thing to do is to blame it on Antifa. But we know exactly who they are. You're dense, yeah. So now you're gonna, so here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna say goodbye to you. All right, you know, you can have an opinion, and if you can intelligently express your opinion, I'm all for it. If you're gonna get personal and just throw out insults, then you're gone. What else? Sam O'Bohak, question. I believe Trump is over with. That's not a question. But what about the ideology that he has helped to facilitate? White supremacy might, hopefully not, seek revenge for the downfall of their hero, astrologically. I don't know. I mean, Trump, by the way, Trump didn't invent any of this. Go back 4 years and you've got Sarah Palin. And you've got Michelle Bachmann, you know, same ilk. And it's been getting worse and worse. And it's going to continue to get worse. As long as there is this push for people to not educate themselves and not be critical thinkers and only be stimulated by their emotional agendas, then you're going to have more and more of these, because, you know, Trump's appeal is no joke. There literally is almost half the population of the United States thinks he's doing good, and that's very frightening, because it means that you've got almost half the population that are either borderline personality disorder, or they're codependent, or they're narcissistic personality disorder, or they've got narcissistic or borderline traits to such a degree that, you know, somebody who clearly doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't have the first clue what government is, and is unstable and dangerous, and is punitive. The thing about Trump is that what people like about him is that if you cross him, he destroys you. They like that about him. That makes them feel safe. That tells me that you've got a huge number of people who have daddy issues. As long as daddy is strong and punitive, even if I don't agree with him, I'm going to follow him. That's what's frightening about it. And that there's this push in the United States for people to not be educated. That's very frightening. Because the uneducated and the emotionally unevolved are very easily manipulated. Look at all the guys that yesterday that trashed the Capitol. They had QAnon T-shirts on. We're talking about not just inaccurate conspiracy theorists, but people who are involved in completely, totally irrational conspiracies. Now, you can create a false conspiracy that's rational. They're talking about totally irrational ones. So we're talking about people who have major emotional issues. So they're uneducated, they're emotionally unstable, and they're very easily manipulated with fear. And as I'm saying here, there are conspiracies, and I'm giving you one. The Koch brothers. If you really want a conspiracy, I swear to you, if you want a conspiracy, follow that one. That is a conspiracy that you can find. QAnon is just, whatever you heard on Twitter. The craziness that Trump is some kind of alien plant and he's here to save the world. That's what those guys who trashed that's what they believed. So there's a difference between crazy conspiracy and potential, but we don't know if it's true conspiracies. And then there's actual conspiracies that are very easy to track down. And it's rich people with money. It's very easy. The health industry, the drug industry, very easy. I mean, you don't have to go looking for it. You don't have to create aliens out of the sky bringing a savior in the name. I mean, you can tell. I mean, these people want to make money by keeping you sick, and so they're going to work against that. It's a conspiracy you can follow. I mean, seriously, that's the sad part. That's why it's important to be critical thinkers, and why it's important to have a spiritual practice that keeps you emotionally and psychologically evolved. So that's why I'm okay if somebody doesn't want to be political and if that's their choice, but I'm not okay with people who are taking their ignorance and using it as a badge of honor and, saying, yeah, I choose to be ignorant about it because all politicians, I mean, that just shows an unwillingness to know the truth. And I'm not going to co-sign that because those people, there were people that died yesterday believing what they were told. There was a woman was shot to death. And I don't know her, but I believe that she was, she was an Air Force, what do you call it? She was in the air. She was a decorated Air Force officer or something like that. So that tells me that she's not a wimp, that she was brave and she was willing to die for her country. She ended up dying for a complete lie. And that's why it's important to be educated and be smart and be critical thinkers, because people's lives are on the line. So I'm not going to co-sign that. Willful ignorance, I'm not going to co-sign. Here's Chatsy therapy. This is weird. The thesis of narcissism is a debunked viewpoint. Well, you have to back that up. Debunked by who? It hasn't been debunked by any psychiatrist or psychologist that I've ever encountered. So you have to, you can't, anybody who makes black and white generalized statements like that tells me there's something not right upstairs. So you've got an agenda. It means you've got an emotional agenda. I don't know what it is yet, but I already know that because that isn't entirely true. There's no critical thinking there. The thesis of narcissism is a debunked viewpoint that people refuse to let go of. As you are well aware of, God is dead. Who said that? I never said God is dead. But God-fearing people remain, yet you remain entangled by psychoanalysis. So, yeah, I don't know what your agenda is, and I don't know why you're, so I was making the point that Donald Trump was a narcissist. So that tells me you like Donald Trump. That tells me if I say that he's a narcissist, that you feel attached to him, which means I'm saying you're a narcissist. You don't like that idea. So that's what I'm getting from this. This is why it's good to be critical thinkers, because you can, if you do the work, you can find out what somebody's emotional agenda is, which is driving their irrational or inaccurate statements, which you've already shown here. Psychoanalysis tries to explain human character exclusively on the libido. No, that's not true. That was one of the main themes of Freud, but that's not all psychology or psychoanalysis. They've moved well beyond that. They see that as maybe some idea, but they've moved well beyond that. If you've done any research, you'd know that. So maybe your research is limited, which again tells me the idea of psychoanalysis threatens you, because perhaps maybe you do have a psychological disorder, and that threatens you. I don't know. Anyway, enough of that. But the man is 70 now. Dad'll become a monk now. Okay, we're talking about Trump. See, any other questions here? Rohan Kapoor, I want to learn a lot from you. By the way, do you want limited chat messages, or is it an open, normal chit chat? I mean, I prefer that people just ask questions, but I know when I do things like this, I'm going to get all the nutcases are going to show up. So all of the order goes out the window. Lushka, question, is there any chance of Trump becoming spiritual? Of course there's a chance. I hope that for everybody. I wouldn't take that away from anybody. As I said, I don't think Trump is evil. I think he's emotionally and mentally disabled. I think he's sick. I think the people who are responsible for what happened yesterday, although Trump was the instigator, is the people who created him. I mentioned two of the people. Ted Cruz is one, but Ted Cruz himself is even a product of what I'm saying. Mitch McConnell, I think, is responsible, because he's known the whole time what was really going on. And he chose to foment people's fear and confusion because it benefits him politically. Same thing with Lindsey Graham. I hold him responsible for Trump. Those are the guys who created the Trumps. He wasn't the first, he won't be the last. The problem is they couldn't control him. And as soon as they realized that they couldn't control him and that he almost got them killed, then they turned on him, which shows you that they've known the whole time that he was bad news. And as leaders, they should be, you can have a conservative or liberal opinion, I don't care one way, but at least be responsible and help educate people. That's your job as a leader, to help people know the truth and see the truth and defend their ability to know the truth. And when you're manipulating people's emotional immaturity and you're manipulating people's lack of education and you're using that to get your agendas across at their expense, then I hold you responsible. So I don't hold Trump responsible. Trump is a puppet. Our friend earlier is right. He's a puppet. He's still responsible for what he's done, and the people who put somebody in that position are responsible. Let's see, what else? But can he become spiritual? I believe anybody, if they choose to, can change anytime they want. Most people don't go beyond their character, and that's the sad part. And that's what we do in things like the Manifestation Mastery course, is to help you, change your character, so that you're not a slave to your what you've been programmed to be. You're not a slave to your conditioned self, and that's really what spirituality is about, to evolve beyond that. And that means having critical thinking and all kinds of other things that a lot of people who indulge in spirituality don't have. And I'm trying to bring a balance so that people can be spiritual and have critical thinking and be educated and be emotionally evolved. That's the idea here. Let's see, is there even a sliver of a chance that has the ego taken over? Well, you have an assumption there, and you have an assumption that somebody's ego can take over. And like I said, the ego is just the self. There's nothing wrong with having a strong sense of self. In fact, the problem with Trump is that he has no ego. Because if he had an ego, he would, number one, he'd be able to stop himself. He can't stop what he's doing. I mean, if you were to tell him 4 years ago that he was going to foment insurrection, and because of him, people were going to storm the Capitol and all of that, he would have said, no, that's crazy. I would never do that. He can't help what he's doing. The thing with borderlines is that they can't be rejected. It's death to them. And for him to lose the election, he feels rejected. And it's emotionally so damaging to him that he's now completely, totally melting down. And that's why he, if you don't know what happened, when they stormed the Capitol, he watched on television for 2 hours and did nothing, while everybody around him was saying, call the National Guard. And he was doing nothing. He was enjoying it. And that's a sane person doesn't do that, because had he been, emotionally, if he had a sense of self and an ego, he would have known, even if he wanted that, he would have been smart enough to know, this is bad news for me. I have to stop this, because this is going to come back and bite me in the ass. He's out of control. And he's out of control because he doesn't have an ego. He doesn't have a sense of self. And that's because, based on what I've learned, and if his chart is accurate, his mother didn't love him. And that's a very sad thing. That's nothing to judge him over. I don't judge him for that. I feel bad for him. He never got the love that he wanted, which makes him create this is what narcissists do. They create a false, a firewall, a false self, and they can never, ever be wrong, and they can never, ever lose. And you saw what happened. He lost, and he lost it. So much so that he tried to overthrow the government. He would have. He's been trying to ever since the election. Anybody with eyes can see that. And he tried to do it legally, and he wasn't able to do it. And now he's doing whatever he's doing. If you have a question, SB, do me a favor, write the word question so I can see it. You say, what is your perspective of the state of masculine energy in the world, given the current state of politics? I mean, I think I know where you're going with this, and that's, I've talked about the masculine and the feminine, but the fact is you can't have one without the other. So if you want me to, what I think you're trying to get me to do, which is talk about how weak men are, and how damaged the masculine is, then we have to start talking about how damaged the feminine is. Do you want me to go that route? That's a whole video in and of itself. So it's an okay question, but that's a really long conversation that we don't have time for today. Let's see. Cosmic Wanderer says, I recommend the book Dispelling the Wetiko, Breaking the Spell of Evil. I don't know, I'm not going to co-sign that because I don't know what it is. If I knew what the book was, I might, but I don't want to necessarily give my thumbs up to a book that I may or may not approve of, so we are going to remove that comment. Chatsy Therapy, I know what God is dead is from Nietzsche. I know what it is. You are a former Christian turned heathen animist. No, that's not entirely correct. I'm not a heathen. But so what? I don't believe in Jehovah. That doesn't mean Jehovah is dead. Jehovah actually is not dead. Jehovah is very much alive. It is the human narcissistic ego. And people who worship Jehovah are worshiping a real God. They're worshiping their own ego. So, Chatsy, you're trying to manipulate me with what you think you know about me, and you haven't honestly revealed what your emotional agenda is, and so I'm not going to let you go ahead and try and string me along down your thought process here. I encourage people to be direct and honest with their feelings and their thoughts. You're very intellectual. You like to manipulate people. You're that guy that smokes a lot of weed and tells people how to think. And that's how I'm experiencing you anyway. I don't like that. The psychiatry industry, and again, people who use generalizations like the media and the psychiatry industry, they have an emotional agenda. So you're not being straightforward. You're not being honest. Psychiatry industry sees everything heroic as a neurotic disorder. It's tied to liberalism and Christian values. There you go. So now I know enough about you to know that you're far right. You're like me. You don't like Christianity, but probably for different reasons. And you also don't want to look at yourself. And so you're going to badmouth psychology. Again, maybe you're a narcissist. Maybe you've been diagnosed with it. You're not being honest. I don't know any of that. I just know that so far you're being manipulative and dishonest. And you are acting like a narcissist. Let's see. My agenda is psycho-political. That's not an agenda. So Chatsy Therapy, I'm going to stop here because you're giving me a headache and you're pissing me off. But if you want to understand what I teach, watch my videos on critical thinking. You are not employing critical thinking here. And I'm not interested, whenever somebody tries to shove an assumption down my throat, I'm always going to be rubbed the wrong way. So far you and I are not off to a good start. What else? Rohan Kapoor question on astrology softwares I see. I don't know what you're asking. May I know what that means? No, because I don't even know what the hell that means. All right. Anything else? All right. So I went far more political than I wanted to. We would have been better off talking about critical thinking. So that's it for me today, guys. Anyway, forget all that other stuff. My prediction is this. My prediction is that Trump's fall has just begun based on his astrology. Based on his astrology, we're going to see now the flip side of his chart, which is evidenced in his Navamsha. And we're going to see his reputation, his career go down the tubes, and he might devolve. I mean, he's emotionally compromised now, based on what we're hearing from people around him. And this might be so devastating to him psychologically that he may never recover. That's not my wish for him. That's my prediction based on what I've seen and what I'm seeing in his chart. And there's also a good chance he might end up in prison, and/or they might even end up locking him up. He might end up emotionally, like having real major serious emotional issues to the point where they have to put him away. I don't wish that for him, and I'm totally okay if none of that happens. I will totally be okay, and I'll be the first one to say I'm wrong. What I was wrong about in my first two predictions was the timing. So far, it looks like, because I got to be honest, when he was so bulletproof and he survived all the stuff that came at him, I started thinking, wow, I mean, how could his chart be so off? Because his chart really says that when he gets older, it's all going to come crashing down, and his reputation is going to go in the crapper, and he's going to lose his emotional, his emotional shit. But it wasn't happening. He was getting stronger, and he was getting more successful, and no matter what, it just bounced off of him, and he kept on doing more and more outrageous things, and people kept on, holding him up, and his following got greater and greater, and that confused the hell out of me, because that's not what I saw in his chart. So I'm the first to say that, I was totally wrong about the timing of those two. Based on what I'm seeing, that's why I'm doing this. Maybe I was right. I just didn't know the timing, and we'll see. So let's see if my prediction turns out to be right. Okay, Chatsy therapy again. We're not going to do that. You and I are not going to have this back and forth you think we're going to have. I'm done. If you want to ask an honest question, I'm happy to take it, but seriously, you've already rubbed me the wrong way in so many ways. And I don't know if you've been on my channel long enough to know how I like to interact on these, and maybe you're a great guy, but you're just rubbing my fur the wrong way, and I don't want to play with you anymore. So watch my channel and get a better idea of what I teach and how to interact with me. And if you come back on and you ask a respectful, honest question, I'll be more than happy to engage with you. But for now, you and I, we're not going to play ball. Dakota Spruill question, has your spiritual practice helped your surfing? Surfing is part of my spiritual practice, but the answer is yes, it has. I'm only asking because I'm wondering how it could help my own hobbies. Well, let me tell you. The spiritual practice I have, besides my meditation and my mantra and all the beliefs and runes and all that kind of stuff, is, I can show you what I do. I do all of that, and then I haven't done it in years. But I started doing it again, and I'm doing it every day now for at least an hour a day. And it's me doing this kind of stuff, which is ostensibly on the surface, it's a martial art, but actually what I'm doing is I'm doing some very powerful energy work and stimulating the meridians associated with the heart center and what's called the triple burner. And the end result of that is that it's actually making my physical exercise, which has totally surprised me. I'm actually able to go and lift weights, like in the gym, like lift really, really hard. And then I come back and I do those practices. And for whatever reason, that is adding to a whole level of energy. And I wake up the next day energized. Whereas normally, if I went to the gym and lifted for an hour, and lifted really heavy, or if I surfed all day, I'd be dead for 2 days. I'd just be in bed, not able to move. So it has totally revolutionized my practice. In fact, I'm wondering, should I go to the gym tonight? Maybe I'll go to the gym tonight. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's one of them. Let's see what else. Tara Furnace is not asking a question. She says, oh, she does ask a question. She says, I'm not very informed about USA politics, but watching what happened was so upsetting. Yeah, tell me about it. Question, do you think people will start to work together? I personally don't know. I did a rune reading on Biden's presidency, and you can watch it, it's up there. Now, again, that's a rune reading, and I even say, I could be influencing this, and so who knows if this is true or not. It's fun, and so I made a prediction based on a rune reading, which says that he was going to create more cooperation. And if he's able to, he's gonna help. Trump has trashed our reputation. I don't have to tell you. You're a foreigner. You're in another country besides the U.S. I'm technically not in the U.S. either, so I'm not even. I'm not there. But one thing, guys in the U.S., in case you don't know, I've been in Australia for a year and a half, and Trump has made us a joke. People, it's a joke. They laugh about him. They make jokes about him. And the reputation of the United States has been trashed, especially in Europe, been trashed. Not just the reputation, but the influence. And this was, this lends credence that Trump was a sleeper operative for, an unintentional operative for Russia and China. Because the one thing that they wanted from the U.S. is their lack of influence on international policy. And now, because he pulled out of all kinds of things and broke promises, and in Iran, in Europe, what's ended up happening is the rest of the world has just forgotten about the U.S. and they're just on their own now. They're not even paying attention. So Biden has a good reputation. Of course, he's been in. He was vice president for 8 years and he was senator for decades. So he has strong connections internationally. So I'm hoping he'll be able to bring back not only the reputation of the United States, although we'll never live this down. Trump's 4 years did damage beyond what you can possibly imagine. We'll never be back to where we were, ever. The United States will never. I'm telling you, this is a prediction. If you live longer than me, you'll see if I'm right or not. But the United States will never be at the level of influence that they had before Trump. But hopefully Biden will have the ability to not only get some, because the point is that, now that we know how fragile our democracy is, we know that an absolute emotionally and mentally compromised and uneducated person can end up ruling the world. The rest of the world is going to be like, we got to not, invest too much in these guys because in every 4 years it could totally change. That's just a fact of the matter. That's never going away. But hopefully Biden will be able to get our reputation back up and maybe fix some of the damage to our influence. I can tell you here in Australia, I've talked to people are afraid of what's happening because without the United States, Australia is really vulnerable to China. And if the United States loses its influence over the Pacific, meaning if it doesn't keep China at bay, which Trump did not do. I don't care. What's so ridiculous is people saying Biden's going to come in and China's going to take over. And the exact opposite is what happened. Trump came in, Russia and China gained huge influence and power because of him. They laugh at us. In fact, it was Russia's absolute attack on the United States, which ended up with not just it wasn't a foreign country that invaded our capital. It was patriots. It was United States citizens that were threatening the lives of American politicians. And I promise you that Putin is clapping and laughing because that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted us to doubt our own political system, to doubt our own democracy, and he was hoping that we would destroy it ourselves, which is exactly what almost happened and may continue to happen. And the sad part is that a lot of you listening to me, you think that I'm 100% flipped wrong. And there's nothing I can say. There's no amount of proof I can tell you that will convince you otherwise, because you've been emotionally stimulated and manipulated by the people I told you about. And even those people, the thing about the Koch brothers who started all this, they're the ones responsible for creating the atmosphere over decades so that this could happen. They did it, they just wanted it to happen a little bit so that they could control government for their own financial interests. They didn't want all this to happen. They didn't want the union to fall apart. They didn't want any of that. They just wanted to be able to manipulate people enough to get in the legislation that would keep them rich. When Trump came on the scene, they tried to get rid of him because they were smart enough to know that they couldn't control him. You can see, if you type in Koch brothers, you'll see the Koch brothers were up in arms about Trump. They wanted to get rid of him because they couldn't control him. Now you've seen that the Republicans can't control him. Those that, Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, they flipped on him. They turned on him because they couldn't control him anymore. And as you see, I'm not all emotionally flipped out here. And if you're willing to put your emotional agendas aside and listen to what I'm saying and go see if I'm right or not, you'll find out. And if you want to hold on, again, if you want to hold on to a conspiracy, I'm happy to provide a real conspiracy for you. If you need to feel like you're being victimized, and if you need to feel like the elites are manipulating you and lying to you, I will co-sign that, but I'll show you who's really doing it. It's not the people that you think. And that's why people need to be critical thinkers and get smart and get emotionally evolved. Otherwise, this is just the beginning. And you'll lose your freedom. All right, what else? Lushka question. You just referred to Jehovah as the narcissistic ego. How is Trump's ego non-existent if he is also a narcissist? Well, because the narcissistic ego that's a phrase I'm using to talk about the false self. So you have the true self, which is your soul. Even Trump has a soul. Underneath all that craziness and insecurity and malignant narcissism, underneath all of that is a soul. And when his body and his brain and his lower self, after he dies, his soul will, wake up and it'll do whatever it has to do. And he's here for a reason, and he's here for lessons and, all that kind of stuff. So I don't judge him. He's not an evil person. He's not going to go to hell. But, he's got a lot of growing to do. That's your true self. Your false self, or the narcissistic ego, is when somebody doesn't get love as a kid. It's real simple. Somebody said you've got 3 years to get it right. So in the first 3 years of our life, if your mother especially is able to hold you and look at you and say to herself, I want to know who this being is, because I want to reflect back to this being their individual self. That gives the baby, this is what happens when mothers are looking at babies and they're cooing at babies, or they're mimicking. The baby goes, ah, and the mother goes, ah. That's the mother saying, you're an individual, you exist, you have worth simply in your uniqueness. And I love what is special about you. I love you just for who you are. A true mother will love the kid if they have no legs or 3 legs. A narcissistic mother will judge the child based on their projection. So if you're born in a narcissistic family, a dysfunctional family, which many people are, I'm going to say probably at least 30% of the population of the United States came from a dysfunctional narcissistic home life, myself included, then you're going to have a mother and a father who are going to shame you. And you will have to get your love and approval based on what you do. Donald Trump, because he lost the election, feels he has no value, which is why he can't tolerate the thought of losing, which is why he says, I didn't lose. I didn't lose. In fact, I won. I won even though every single 20, 50 plus lawsuits have failed, even though my own attorney general, even though my own people that I put into the Supreme Court, even though the guy I campaigned for who was governor of Georgia, Republican, even though all those people said it was a fair election, I can't accept that, because if I didn't win the election, that means I have no value and nobody loves me and I will die. That's what's going on inside of him. That's why he's flipping out. So his narcissistic ego is a false ego. Jehovah is the false ego. What does Jehovah say? I mean, you could put these words in Trump's mouth. Jehovah says to Moses, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." There's 3 of the 10 commandments which are about only worshiping Jehovah. He says, if you love me, you will follow every single one of my commandments to the letter. If you follow every single one of my commandments to the letter and you love me, I will bless you this way, this way, this way, and this way. And then he says, if you do not follow all of my commandments to the letter, you hate me. And if you hate me, I'm going to curse you this way, this way, this way, and this way. And how has Donald Trump worked with people? If they co-sign him, he loves them. The moment that they do something he doesn't like, he destroys them. He has this narcissistic ego. So people, when they worship Jehovah, they're worshiping their own narcissistic ego. That's why Jesus is supposedly full of love, and yet Christians judge homosexuals, they judge people of other races, they judge people of other religions, they judge people of other political bents. You're evil if you're a Democrat, homosexual, black guy, according to Christians. That's the narcissistic ego. So a true self, I understand what you're saying, you're confused by what I said, but there's nothing wrong with having an ego. It's just if the ego is an actual ego, an actual self, then you're individuated, which means that other people can have differing feelings about you, and it won't affect, number one, how you feel about yourself and how you feel about others. Which is why, even though Donald Trump, I think, is very destructive, and I completely am on the other side of him in all kinds of things, I don't have anything personally against him. I actually know that he's mentally and emotionally damaged because his mother didn't love him, and that makes me very sad when I think about it. That she neglected him to such a degree, they created this borderline narcissist. It's very sad. And it's sad that 30% of the population of the United States has this same borderline tendency. Look at the guys who broke into the Capitol. Look at their faces. Listen to the things they say. There's one clip of somebody screaming, "Woohoo!" as they're breaking windows and threatening people's lives, and that guy, it was like a 4-year-old. Clearly that and if you're going to sit here and tell me that the people that broke in there, that they don't drink and they're vegans and they're all into physical health and fitness, you're going to tell me that? No, man, they sit around when they're done and they go back and they pop back as many beers as they can get inside of them, and come on. These are people who are not the most evolved, health conscious, and they're definitely not pillars of society. Let's just be honest. All you got to do is look at them. It's just really clear by their affect, that they're not the cream of the crop in terms of society. They're the dregs. As I wasn't a huge fan of Hillary Clinton as a person. I didn't have anything against her politics. I thought she would have been an ineffective politician or a president. But she was absolutely right. They are the basket of deplorables. That's not a judgment. It means it's the dregs of society, the people who are on the fringes, who can't hold down jobs, who don't love themselves, who came from dysfunctional, abusive homes, who feel like victims, who don't know who or what is doing it to them. Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's aliens. Oh, it's Trump. Oh, it's whoever can tap into their despair and their pain and give them a justification for how they feel, they'll follow that person to the ends of the earth. That's the danger of people like Trump, because he has the ability to gather together the disaffected people who are in pain and give them a reason, and they'll go and do whatever, as long as, because they worship him, which has always baffled me. He seems so incompetent in so many ways. I mean, he can't even, talk coherently. He's clearly not all there upstairs. He's not the smartest, the sharpest knife in the drawer, without a doubt. I mean, anybody with eyes can see that. Anyway, but that's not a judgment on him. I don't have anything personally against the guy. Let's see, what else? Dale Hussing, yeah, so watch from the beginning. I'm talking about Donald Trump's chart, so you have to watch from the beginning. Let's see, Dakota Spruill question, you should go to the gym tonight. Tricked you, not a question. Yeah, I don't like that. If you're going to ask a question, ask a question. But I think I am going to go to the gym. All right, that's it. Nothing else. We're all done. We'll see how many subscribers I lose tonight. But anyway, that's it. Keep safe, everybody. And in all seriousness, whatever side of the aisle you're on, let's put out some healing. I mean, it's bad for the whole world. The whole world is shocked by this. This isn't just a United States thing, because what happens in the U.S. has a strong impact on the rest of the world. And now that I'm here in another country, I see that. And so whatever your politics are, I mean, let's focus on healing. And even as spiritual as I am, I still care about the world, and I care about how we treat each other and how we affect each other. And this is part of that. This isn't just something minor. This isn't some minor, ineffectual, nonsensical thing. This is something real. And the symbolism of it. What we don't understand is the symbolism of what happened yesterday to the rest of the world. Even countries that may dislike the United States for whatever reason, they still stand as, the most powerful military, the most powerful economy, and they stand for, there's still something that has an ability to do good and influence the world in a positive way and bring security in a positive way. And so the symbolism of that was that there's a lot of countries going, holy crap, if the people of the United States are doing this to themselves, then how can we depend on them for anything? Australia, I know there's a lot of Australians that are worried, because it's like, if the United States falls apart, who's going to keep China away? It's the United States that's keeping China at bay, and it'll change everything. So, this has real meaning. I'm okay with things changing. Empires rise and fall, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not unaware of it, and I'm not unaware of the significance and the symbolism of it. And I think it's important. So I think we should really be conscious about what happens next, and to be consciously connected with the events as they unfold. And just respond and react consciously to this. And maybe this can be something really good. Maybe this can turn into people waking up, and maybe more people like me and more people like Mitt Romney yesterday. If you ever get a chance to watch what he said, I mean, I really appreciate it. He was a voice for reason and a voice for critical thinking, and I really love what he said when he said, if elected officials are responsible to lead, and if your constituents don't understand what's going on, then you explain it to them. You tell them the truth. You owe that to them, instead of what politicians were saying, which is a lot of people are frustrated and they don't know what to believe, as though that's their job. Their job isn't to stand up and to educate. You know, if you're in a position of authority, you're in a position to educate. And then people can make up their own minds, but they have to have all of the facts and all of the truth before they can decide which way they want to go. Those people yesterday that sacked the Capitol, they're ignorant. I'm not absolving them of their ignorance, but they're ignorant. They're ignorant and they're misinformed and they've been manipulated and they're emotionally compromised. Those are people who grew up in the, not very loving, not very educated homes, a lot of them, and they're emotionally compromised, and they'll follow anybody that stimulates them emotionally. And if you are somebody of power and you are somebody of influence, it's your job to educate people so that they can be self-empowered. And those people were not self-empowered yesterday. Very sad. I feel sorry for all of them. Yeah, I mean, people lost their lives. I keep thinking of I only know of one, the woman who lost her life. She was shot. And there's no doubt in my mind that she was honest and sincere in what she was doing, but she was misinformed and she was uneducated and probably emotionally compromised and easily manipulated. And if Trump hadn't sat there and said to people, okay, we're now going to walk down and I'm going to go with you and we're going to influence, they wouldn't have done that. If he hadn't done that, if he hadn't said that, they wouldn't have done that. And the whole thing just is very saddening, It's very saddening to me. And I'd love to see a lot of healing and growth, and hopefully we can be a part of that. All right, that's it for me, guys. See y'all later. If you're new to the channel, go check out thunderwizard.com, especially the 90-day challenge. But you can subscribe at whatever level you want. If you want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it. Of course, subscribe and hit the bell button. And most importantly, put time in and watch the channel. Watch the videos. This is, I'm here to educate. And there's, how many, 1,000 videos or so on my channel now? Put the time and effort to learn what it is I'm teaching, because there's stuff on this channel you're not going to find anywhere. And I really am here to empower you. I really am here to educate you. I'm not here just to spout my opinion and be, like I am, harsh and critical to people. I'm here to educate. And it's my honest desire that I empower you to have the best life you can possibly have. The only way that you can get that from what I give you is to make use of all of the materials that I make available to you, the books, the DVDs, the streaming videos and the free stuff, and then of course the stuff on the subscription channel. All right, that's it. Talk to you guys soon. Take care of yourselves.